Do you want to start by telling us where it all began?
I suppose I was very young when I first ran into difficulties with my mental health. I was 18 years of age when I started to suffer from panic attacks and had not got a bull's notion what was going on, didn't know what was happening to me, was scared, out of my wits to tell anybody about it, because I suppose I had been somebody who grew up with very little confidence. From a very early age in my life, I never developed that ability to be confident. I always felt I was lesser than other people and they were always better than me. And even, in my early teens and even childhood, I would have never felt that I was ever good enough. So I reached the age of 18. I started to suffer from severe anxiety. Couldn't tell anybody. Like a lot of people that come to grow, we isolate when that happens to us. And, I felt like I had failed. So I didn't want to turn around and say, now I'm failing again. So that was a big thing for me. So keeping it a secret was a big thing. And I paid a very, very high price for keeping it a secret, because for the next 4 years plus, I lived a life of absolute misery, suffering from anxiety and going in and out of anxiety and bouts of depression, then anxious and bouts of depression, and taking medication and taking all different types of medication, being prescribed all different types of medication to try and get a handle on it. And for me, I say to this day, my biggest downfall was I couldn't talk to anybody about it. Come from a very large family, couldn't even share with my parents what was going on for me. So I hid it away because I didn't want to be seen as a failure.
Yeah, and I'm sure that so many other people, that's kind of where they are. And Christine, so at that age, was it 4 years? During that 4 years, I mean, that must have been so tough. And at what point did you kind of think enough is enough, or did it all come to a head? Or
oh yeah, Sheila, for me, it came to a head when I couldn't take it anymore.
Okay.
And I just felt I can't do this anymore. And I started to think about suicide. So I thought, like, the pain of this is, and a lot of people, it has been researched, and a lot people who have thoughts and feelings of suicide, afterwards, if they're lucky enough to survive and not complete the act of suicide, they will tell you that it's not that I wanted to kill myself, I just wanted the pain to go away. And that's very much what it was for me. I didn't want to live in this painful life that I was living, where every day was a burden and a struggle, and doing the most ordinary, normal, everyday things had become insurmountable for me. Getting out of the bed in the morning, having a shower, trying to face into a little job I had. They became, even socializing, being with my family, being with my friends, my boyfriend, had become a struggle. So, for me, it felt like, I'd be better off out of here. So I started to think of suicide. And that's when it came to a head for me. I had been seeing a psychiatrist at the time, and he was concerned for my safety. So I needed to go to hospital.
Okay.
And I think that's when the whole thing turned around for me, when I went to hospital.
Okay. And I suppose that nearly puts, it's like pressing pause, isn't it? If you're in hospital and all those little daily tasks are taken away, and you can actually maybe see what's happening. And then how did you, from there, you came across Grow Mental Health? How did that happen?
The secret was out. And that's why I always say that actually going to hospital, and this is not a criticism of hospital at all, because in my work over the years, I would, seriously talk to people about the need for, sometimes there's a need for a stay in hospital, for somebody else to take care of you. And I would really seriously encourage that for some people. But for me, hospital was not the answer.
Okay.
But what it did give me was time to reflect. And what it did give me was that turning point where the secret was out. Now all my family knew I was in trouble, and my friends knew I was in trouble, that I had reached a point where I needed to be hospitalised. and the secret was out. So then I couldn't hide anymore. So in terms of how that helped, that was it. I couldn't hide anymore. I had to do something about it. You know, sometimes I think it was a case of do or die. I had to do something about it or I couldn't cope with it anymore. So it was that turning point. And while I was in hospital, my mother, God be good to her, heard about Grow. We didn't know what Grow was. Grow wasn't in my city at that particular time. And somebody had tried to get Grow up and running. It had been there in prior to that, but it had fizzled out. And then some person had a relative who was very unwell. They travelled to Cork and they asked would they start Grow in my city, which is Limerick. And they came up and started to Grow again. I happened to be in hospital. My mom heard about it. She didn't know what it was, and I suppose she was so desperate to help me at the time. If the truth be known, I probably went more for my mom than myself, because I was at that stage where I felt that, you know, I can't do this, I can't fix this. I fully believed I couldn't fix it, which is another great awakening, because no matter how unwell we are, you know, hospital can help, medication can help, Grow can help, counselling can help. But the bottom line is I am the only one that can really help myself. And that dawning, that hadn't dawned on me at that point. So I went along to my first Grow meeting, and I suppose it was my mother, for my mother's sake more than anybody else. Went into the meeting. There was a room of about 14 people, and sure, they pulled out this book, and I didn't know what the hell this was going to be about. But the one thing I did was I listened. I listened very carefully to what was going on in the room. I didn't partake. I had nothing to say because I didn't have the confidence nor the concentration to engage in the process at the time. But I listened very attentively. And fortunately for me, and I suppose in Grow, we always say that the story, the testimony is one of the greatest gifts we give to each other in Grow. There was a lady telling her story, and I could relate so much. I even felt on the night that, oh my God, did somebody tell her about me? That she was saying so much of what I was going through. And it was such a relief, because, you know, a lot of people will tell you that when you're in that place of difficulty, you feel like you are the only person that's going through this, that nobody could understand and nobody could be going through this except for me. And then suddenly you're in a room of about 14 people and you can relate to something that everybody is saying. So that feeling of, God, I'm not alone anymore, that was a pivotal moment for me.
Okay, and I suppose when you're saying that you couldn't talk to anyone for 4 years, and even coming from a large family, you didn't feel that anyone in that family would have understood, to then be in a room of so many people and feel that they understand must have been a huge support.
It was absolutely phenomenal, Sheila. And I remember leaving the meeting that night, and you know, there's a weird kind of comfort in knowing I'm not, number one, the only one, and number two, I'm not the worst person. You know, there are other people that are going through stuff that is probably, and this is not to minimize what anybody is going through, but I felt there was other people in that room that probably had it more difficult than me. Maybe their life circumstances or how they got there. I think in Grow, I would be a firm believer in never minimize the pain that anybody's going through, but the reasons we got there can be different.
Very true.
So there was that moment for me that I came away thinking, my God, I'm not the only one that's going through this, and there's people and they're probably going through more difficult situations than me. So there was a comfort in that, and there was a sense, I suppose, very early on in Grow, a sense of belonging, where I couldn't talk to my family because I felt they didn't understand. And I did have a lot of the pull your socks up, haven't you got this, haven't you got that? But in Grow, people accepted you where you were, where you are when you walk in that door, and that was so comforting.
Yeah, no, it sounds like that first meeting was really big for you. And Christine, just I suppose the 12 steps, were they something that you heard on that first night, the 12 steps of the GROW program?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely, Sheila, you know, because I remember reading the 12 steps being read at the meeting,
Okay.
and thinking, what the hell is this? You know, I don't understand this. I had a vague recollection that maybe I heard this from somebody that maybe was on an AA program.
Okay.
That was the only kind of moment that 12 steps AA. And then I thought, oh my God, what is this 12 steps? I don't understand this. What are they for? What are they supposed to do?
Yeah.
How can I maybe use this? And it wasn't even that serious. It wasn't really how could I use it, but what are they about primarily was my first thought.
Okay.
Why do we need this?
Yeah. And Christine, for I suppose this series of videos for YouTube, you've picked step 4 and step 5 as the ones that you kind of felt were part of your journey of feeling that you were, I suppose, on the way to recovery, that you felt step 4 and step 5 were one point that you remember. So step 4 is we acknowledge our gifts and our strengths, and step 5 we also tackle our weaknesses and our failures. So just tell me a little bit about how they kind of resonated with you at a particular time, and how you felt that was how you moved forward.
I suppose, Sheila, for me, steps 4 and 5 go together, you know, and it is in GROW, step 4 and step 5. Okay, there's 12 steps there, and you know, with time and with the shared experience of listening to other people, I got a handle on what the steps were about. And for me, the steps are a guide, and they're a discipline, and they keep you on the right track. And I think everybody in GROW, at every meeting, a GROW member should be able to identify what step they're working on, because they are your guide through the journey. And I think it doesn't matter, there's 12 steps there, but people don't necessarily use them in chronological order, because you might be on step 3 and then next week you might be working on step 10. And I think the only one you have to do is step 1, because step 1 is the one where you admit that you are in difficulty. So you can't get out of the traps unless you use step 1. But the rest of them don't necessarily need to be worked in chronological order. So I was there for a while before the penny dropped and the understanding of the steps came. So I did my best to work the steps that were relevant to me at the time. And then for a lot of us, when we were in GROW for a little while, we realized that there's more to this program, you know, because when we come first, we just want the bad feelings to go away, and we want people to support us and help us and give us a little bit of advice. And then the penny drops, like I mentioned earlier, that instead of wanting the world to fix me, the realization comes that it's me who can fix me. And that is what I think I really identified in step 4 and step 5. So it's about taking inventory. And I would have felt that I was a failure at everything, and that, you know, everybody was better than me, and I didn't have the confidence, I didn't have the wherewithal to do things that other people were doing. And of course, you know, I compared myself constantly to the world, and I always came out on the bottom. So then, when having been in GROW for a while and getting and gaining that understanding of how these 12 steps were working, I looked at step 4 and 5. And for me, they are the hard-working steps. And I think that's where you really have to put in the effort if your journey from here on is going to be productive. So in steps 4 and 5, we acknowledge our gifts and our strengths. And in step 5, we tackle our weaknesses and our failures. So it's like making an inventory. And an inventory for me means really reflecting inwardly and taking stock of what makes me, me. And that was really kind of a powerful moment. I had to look at, what have I got? What talents, what skills, what type of personality am I? What are my moral codes, and so on? And really look at that. And that's kind of step 4. And then step 5 is, what am I going to do with that? You know, because no person has the same set of skills and talents and abilities. We're all different. You know, people are experts in the medical field and the scientific field. Other people are excellent working with their hands and in gardens, and you know, they work well with people. They're socially equipped to do lots in that area. Some people are great speakers, some people are great teachers, and so on. So we all have a set of skills that are inherent to all of us. But when we're in that place of difficulty, we don't see anything good about ourselves. So it's about really looking inwardly and looking at what set of skills have I, and what can I do with that set of skills. And then, you know, that can be tough for a lot of people in finding what am I good at,
Okay.
you know, and what can I do with what I'm good at.
Yeah.
So I looked at that and I made my list. And, you know, at the time I would have said, my list doesn't amount to much, but I'm going to give it a shot. I wasn't able to, as I can sit here today and I can boastfully tell you about all the things I'm good at. But back then it was kind of one little step at a time. Well, and it's even looking at things like, not necessarily what we can do academically, but even, you know, looking at things like, well, I'm a very kind person and I'm a very helpful person and I care about other people and I want to support those around me and be there for people. I'm good at listening. I'm good at, you know, maybe giving a little bit of advice, and we learn a lot of that in Grow. That would have been the starting blocks for me, listening to other people, being able to share my experience with them through a little bit of advice. So looking at what I had, and it was one step at a time. Yes, I'm good at that. What can I do with that? And then that's where the tackling our weaknesses and our failures come into it. You know, this changing the whole dynamic of how we think. No, I'm not useless at that. I am actually good at that. And I can do that if I really try. And then work in other parts of the program to help you get there. So that would have been very relevant for me at the time. And then realizing as time went on, Sheila, that I had lots of strengths and talents, and, you know, that I could use. And thankfully, through the support of Grow and the other parts of the program that I incorporated into my life, I achieved so many of those things.
Right. And one thing that struck me when you're talking there, Christine, is I suppose if we don't kind of do that inventory and assess what we're good at, we can be putting our efforts into areas that are never going to make us feel good. You know, we could be trying to be something we're not and failing constantly, which is obviously going to make you feel awful. Whereas if you know where your talents lie and you can nurture them, then you're going to feel good and feel you're achieving something. So it's probably something everybody should do.
You know, there are two steps that I think the whole world could use, because we look around society today and we see our young people, you know, I think for me, like, and it was a huge problem for me, image. You know, I always felt that, you know, I was a bit on the ugly side and I wasn't, you know, educated enough, and image became a big thing, and taking into consideration that my difficulties happened in my teens, those very kind of times when image become, you know, and I'm 5'1", right? I always wanted to be 5'8". I was never going to be 5'8", but, you know, like, you know, I'm wasting so much energy, and I know that's a kind of a silly example of it, but I think sometimes we waste so much time on wanting to be things that we're never going to be, and forgetting about the things that we really are good at. And all our energy goes on, and a lot of it is wasted, as I said, on things that are never going to happen for us, and the things that we are so good at are put to aside. So that's why I'm saying that those two steps really take reflection, you know, really reflecting and looking inward and looking at what makes me me. What am I good at? What can I develop? And to use your own word, what can I nurture to become a better person on my journey, because it is about truly understanding your personal interests and your talents, because they play an important role both professionally and personally, and on your journey, on your road. And those things can keep you very, very well, because those things are about being mentally healthy.
Yes.
Accepting what I can do, and maybe parking the things I'm not so good at. And maybe looking at them sometimes and seeing, maybe can I develop those a little bit, but putting the energy into the things that I can do and energy into the things that I am good at. And that really set a path for me that has kept me well for a long, long time.
Yeah, no, that does, it makes sense. And I'm wondering as well, is that step particularly, would you feel more comfortable doing that in a group setting, because you're seeing other people accept that this is something, I would love to be good at, but it's just not me? And does that open you up to, it's okay not to be ticking every box, it's okay, nobody is perfect, and in a group setting that must really come across.
Yeah, and Sheila, I think what you do in the group at times like that is you take the energy from the group, and you take the shared experience of what people are doing, and you think, oh, okay, a lot of people in Grow will tell you that sometimes that they walk out the door of a Grow meeting, and maybe it's not the task that they got that week that they'll work on, but something else has resonated with them that another person, and you think, oh, maybe I'll give that a try. But I think for me, Sheila, in making the inventory, I would have sat down, and it was encouraged in Grow, that you do it whatever way is comfortable for you.
Okay.
And I remember doing it with somebody I had become very close with in Grow, because there were things that I suppose I didn't want everybody to know about me. Yes. And because of the absolute personalness, if that's a word, of making an inventory, it can be a very personal thing, because it takes a lot of looking in and reflecting and admitting that, I'm not good at that. Why am I putting energy into that? I'm good at that, maybe with a little bit of encouragement. So I did it with another person on a one-to-one. And that's where 12-step work in Grow comes into the fore. That, I asked this person, look, would you listen to me? And the person would have listened to and I wrote a lot at that time as well. I wrote down what I was good at, what I wasn't good at, little acceptance of maybe I could be better at that. So I did it with one other person, but that doesn't mean to say that I took great strength and energy from the group and the shared experience. And that whole thing, if, it's another little wisdom in Grow, that if that person can do it, I can do it. I have a chance. And if I fail, and if it's not for me, and there's lots of things that I have tried and they haven't worked out for me, but there's lots of things I have tried and they've worked out a treat. So, it's that finding your way on that journey, and, being able to categorically say, I'm really good at that. And that is where my talents lie. Yeah. And then, working with that.
But Christine, that must have been huge for you to be able to say, I'm really good at that. Like, that must have, from where you've kind of described where you were during those 4 difficult years, and then to be on a journey and to be able to say, I'm really good at that. You must have been in shock with yourself, were you?
Absolutely, Sheila, because when I first went to Grow, I could see nothing good about myself. And this again is the beauty of Grow, and this is the beauty of peer support. I could see nothing good in me. I could write a list of 100 things and not one of them would be positive. Right? And if you asked me to write 3 things that were good about me, I couldn't write that. But I could go on ad nauseum about all the things that weren't good. And I remember I was a very short time in Grow, and I was asked would I become the recorder of the group.
Okay.
And I remember straight away going home, because of that feeling of uselessness that I felt inside myself, that I was absolutely useless and hopeless, and that I had failed at so many things. I, of course, went home, Mrs. Paranoia, thinking, oh my God, why did they ask me to do that? There's something wrong with me now. That it couldn't be a good thing. Couldn't be a good thing.
Yeah.
Why did they ask me to do that? You know, are they feeling sorry for me and see that I'm so useless that they're trying to give me a job? And you know, it's so ridiculous when you think now, when I think, look back and think with a reasonable reason, when I think with reason now, I look back and see how ridiculous it was. They asked me to do the job because they saw in me what I couldn't see in myself. You know, they saw my gifts and my strengths, like in step 4, and they were challenging me to tackle my weaknesses and my failures.
Yeah.
So that was it in a nutshell. They saw in me what I couldn't see in myself, and that's where I'm saying that absolute warmth and energy that comes from a grow meeting and a peer support group.
Yeah.
It almost, Sheila, it almost drags you with some invisible force. It drags you along.
Yeah. And another saying I've heard is, if it's worth doing, it's worth doing badly at the start. And I think when a group tell you that, just give it a try, and we'll be there if it doesn't go perfectly well at the start, but it's worth starting badly. There's some kind of a comfort in that, isn't it? That, you know, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's okay if you take on the recorder job and you need a bit of support for the first 2 or 3 weeks until you find your feet. That's okay. So it's very accepting.
I suppose I have adopted the attitude now in life that, you know it might be funny, but I will try anything once.
Okay.
If it doesn't work for me, then, you know, I might even try it twice. But and anybody that works with me that will know that, or anyone I interact with, you know, I'll never say no. That's off the Richter scale. I will always say, okay, let's give it a go and see. And if it doesn't work, so that is one of the big major lessons I have learned from working those steps. That let's try it. If it doesn't work, we can move on to something else.
Okay.
And in the beginning of doing that, you know, it was almost whispering to myself, okay, I'll give it a try.
Yeah.
And then maybe next week, okay, it worked this week, maybe I'll give it a try for next week. And becoming more confident the more you tried.
Yes.
And then to the point where you think this thing becomes the most natural thing in the world for you to do.
Okay. That's just the progression that you realize. Yeah. And there's a couple of questions, Christine, that we're kind of asking everybody that is doing this video series with us. And one of them would be, I suppose, if you were to sum grow up, and it's very difficult, this is why it's a fun question, but if you were to sum grow up in one word, what would that word be?
There's about 40 words jumping around my head, Sheila, at the moment. But the word, I suppose, that's staying in my head the most is courage.
Courage. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's about courage that people, first of all, to walk in that door. Secondly, to take on a program that you probably never heard of, to use the disciplines, to use the program. But that takes great courage, because mostly people are coming from a place of no courage, you know.
Yeah.
So courage and courageous would be the word.
That's a great word. Yeah. Yeah. And then I suppose how often would you refer back to the 12 steps? In your daily life, how often would you kind of think, oh, I feel like I need to refer back and just...
Yeah, Sheila, every single day. I suppose I'd be one of the elder lemons in Grow now. And, you know, I came to Grow when I was 22. So I have more or less grown up with the Grow program. I'm far from 22 now. So I have, you know, a lot of my growing up was done in Grow. And then, like, I went on to work for Grow and so on. So I would have incorporated a lot of the Grow program into my life, so much so that I hear my daughters quoting the Grow program. So they would have obviously grown up with me in Grow. So I hear my daughters saying wisdoms, I hear them quoting steps, I hear them giving me advice and using Grow, you know, Grow statements. And I think, you know, shut up, I taught you that. So it's every day, like, and
Brilliant.
you know, I mean, one of the first things I do every morning is practice gratitude. You know, I wake up every morning, or maybe last thing before I go to sleep, you know, I thank whoever for
Yeah.
what I did today and what I succeeded at. Or I
Yeah.
wake up in the morning, I have a memory there during COVID. I think we were all gone a bit, wow, what's happening here?
Yeah.
And I remember maybe being more aware of what was going on during that time, and more conscious. And I remember waking up one morning, and it's so a part of my cognitive way of being in the world. I remember waking up one morning and saying, "Oh my God, I'm so grateful for having teeth and hair."
Yeah.
And like I said to myself, where did that come out of? You're supposed to be grateful that your family is healthy,
Yes.
and,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
alive and things like that. I remember, but like I would start off my day, Sheila, with practicing gratitude. I would
Okay.
go through my day, hopefully thinking with reason rather than feelings and imagination. And, I would know my triggers, things
Okay.
that can stress me out. And this is all because of the Grow program. And I can do these things very quickly and very, early
Ex-
in the process.
Yeah.
This is stressing me, and I can see, because I am aware, I have a great awareness because of
Okay.
Grow, and a great self-awareness that
Okay.
keeps me on track.